And then, of course, when COVID came, when I say we needed an FDR, we needed a Churchill, we needed a real statesman, and we had the denier in chief because, he didn't want to act like it was real. He said it's going to go away, it's going to disappear. And then you had communities, and I'll give you two in my region, Albany, Georgia, ravaged by COVID. It's a heavily Black community, very historic community too, in a lot of ways. And Montgomery, Alabama, both of those were really devastated by COVID. And then, uh, but it wasn't just in the rural areas, a lot in the urban areas. A lot of our rural parts of Georgia, I mean, parts of the Southeast, were devastated because these were people who were President Trump's base. And he told them, don't worry about it, it's not real. So, my second book, The Longest 4 Years of My Life, A View from the Field by a Black Man in the Trump administration, I talk about extensively, and I talk about specific people and instances who trusted the system and trusted their president that was giving them real advice that COVID was, when he told them that COVID was just going to disappear, it was not going to really be harmful. We weren't gonna really be devastated by. Of course, we ended up losing over 1 million people, and so many of them said, I never thought it was real. I just didn't. And then so now today, when our people who can warn people, our epidemiologists, are being fired and muzzled,
Yeah.
uh, I think we're going to see COVID. Look, we had the greatest outbreak of measles this year
Yeah.
that we've had in 30 years.
Yeah.
Now, I just read last night, whooping cough is back.
Yeah.
So if nobody's giving you guidance on how to prevent and your, protect yourself in these instances, from the fall, we're going to catch hell. And this is just year one. If
Yeah.
we have to go through this for 3 more years, I say I'm going to be praying because, and a lot of people, there is this element of our society who says, well, we need to thin the herds.
Mm.
And whatever, these are just going to be, there are going to be some casualties. But to me, nothing should be more, even successful business, nothing should be more important than protecting human lives. And in many instances, the problem is, and look, I'm maybe I'm like you in the sense I'm privileged during those almost 2 years, my last 2 years at work, before I retired in 2022. I could do most of my work at home. We were having Zoom calls and team meetings and all this stuff. I didn't have to go and be exposed to people all day.
Right.
But the people who work in our meat house plucking contests, who are processing chicken and beef, the
Yeah.
people who are harvesting our grain and our fruits and vegetables in the field, and in most instances, we'll go back, our Latino brothers and sisters, sometimes our Asian brothers and sisters, and they may go back and there may be 10 or 12 of them in a 2 or 3 bedroom apartment, right? So there's no protection. One gets sick, they all get sick, right?
Yeah.
Those are the vulnerable, and those are the people that we should be most concerned about, but
Yeah.
are least concerned about. And
Mhm.
so uh, it's it's a heavy burden on my heart. That's why those were the longest 4 years of my life. And of course, we had our denier in chief, our tweeter in chief, right? And that's how he communicated. So because my job as a public affairs advisor to the regional director, I'm supposed to remessage what he messages, and we have to formulate our all of our messaging based on what is being messaged out from the president and the secretary of health and human services. So
Mhm.
I'm a late night person by I just am more comfortable. I'm not an early morning person, but like 4:30, I'd find myself subconsciously groping for my phone on my nightstand stand, and I'm pulling it up half eyes open, and I'm seeing what he's tweeted that night that I'm gonna have to react to in the morning. And so it was really, really long and painful and deeply traumatic. And I almost got fired several times. And but you know, there's a certain art to be able to work for one side of the aisle, and then the other side takes over. And as career people, that's our responsibility because I pledged allegiance not to Donald Trump or Obama or Bush or Clinton or Biden, but you know, to the flag, to the Constitution. And so my job is to make whoever is in charge look as good as possible, honestly and earnestly. But I remember getting a letter from a Republican editor in North Georgia. I'd never met her before, but she's on my list. And she wrote me back and she said, look, if you send me something like this again, I'm going to put you on the spam list. You and I both know it's not true. It's a lie. She says, I'm a Republican and I know it's a lie. So don't send me this garbage anymore. Now, of course, in my heart, I was excited that she was saying this because I knew it was garbage. But, you know, during that era, I don't know if you remember Kellyanne Conway, who was not a public affairs person, but she was like one of his chief spokesmen. He
Yeah.
introduced the term alternative fact.
Yeah.
Now, hell, it's a fact or it's not a fact, right? What
Yeah.
the heck is it? So now that's kind of the age we live in.
Yeah.
And so I never got a letter like that from anybody else in any of the other foreign administrations I worked in. So that was a very strange time. And it's just like yesterday, 2 days ago, he fires the budget commissioner because they they tell the truth that the jobs are down, you know. So if you don't like the information, we need to fire the. So we are headed toward an autocracy. Our democracy is at great risk and peril. And so that is something that I think that we should all be concerned about. We
Mhm.
should all be invested in making sure that that does not happen. And this is before the tariffs are just now starting to kick in. We wait to see the impact of that. And this is the only time the first president, Melody, I can honestly say, uh, I do not believe really loves this country. I think all the rest of them, you know, I disagree with them or not disagree with them, but I believe the country was first. Even though I didn't like their methodology sometimes and the stuff they did, but I would believe that the American people and this country was first in their minds
Yeah.
and not their billionaire buddies and whatever it was that they could do to serve themselves. So that's kind of where it is. So that was super traumatic a time and an experience for me, because again, especially as a person, because I had to ask myself, and I had a partner, somebody who recently retired at CMS, which is the Center for Medicare and Medicaid, and they funded the navigators. And the navigators, and the reason the navigators were so important, Melody, particularly so a lot of young people, super computer savvy. Like I have to get my kids to help me with certain things. And certainly, particularly like social media, I really,
Yeah.
uh, I'm never going to learn it like I probably could, which would help me a lot. But um, um, people who are less educated, like there's so many health plans that people can choose from. There are lots of options with different deductibles, different copays. And so the navigators were hired, and healthcare.gov, when you call, you get connected into somebody, either the federally qualified health center, who don't get paid based on which plan you choose. And the navigators don't get paid based on which
Mm.
plan you choose. Now, the health insurance agents do, but you have all those three options. And so the Socio, which is the company, well, not the agency, the sub-agency who funded the navigators, and they would have these every week there would be a different theme. Like you mentioned your theme, trauma. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, being kind this week, this month. So they would have a month which focused on Latin American enrollment, LGBTQ enrollment, African American enrollment, AAIP enrollment, small business enrollment, rural enrollment, all these different. And so um, they would send this newsletter, and we're supposed to send it out to the sister community, the federally qualified health centers, the navigators. And then there are groups like in Mississippi, people like the Children's Defense Fund or the NAACP or these groups, the Southern Baptist, the Baptist National Baptist Convention. And these are people who weren't getting paid to do this work, but they knew how critical it was that their people in their communities had health insurance. So they donated their time and their resources. And so this lady, who was a very good friend of mine, told me he wasn't, when Trump took over and came into office, she wasn't going to send these things out because she told me she had 2 kids at home who like to eat. Now I sent them out anyway because I said there's a certain place, a certain line I have to draw, and if I get fired for doing my job, because it's still the law of the land, right? So you're saying I can't share this information with the people that will increase their health and well-being and likelihood of a long life because you don't like the policy and you swore you would replace and repeal Obamacare and you tried over 70 times in court and you didn't do it. And yet, so you decide you're going to starve the policy out, like uh, advertising for the ACA when Trump came in was slashed by 2/3. They told us we could not no longer be out. Like every year, I go to Mississippi, and they chart out 7 cities from just before below Memphis, and we go through the Mississippi Delta to southern Mississippi, all the way down to Gulfport or Biloxi, and
Wow.
they coordinate these stops. And all of these were media stops. We stop at a hospital or someplace, university, the press would come, the people come, they want to know what has changed from this year to last year about eligibility, about who you call for help, what the qualifications were, options. And so it was a way you kicked off the year. And then they told us, they said everything, this ACA was everything but the devil's spawn. They talked about it was worse things than sliced bread, yet they couldn't replace and repeal it because you remember when John McCain got out of his hospital bell, he came sick as a dog to Congress and he did thumbs down against repealing it. It's almost like you give people something, you got to almost not take it away, especially once they start to see the benefit of it. Because that's what they said about Medicare some 60 years ago when it was first rolled out. They didn't think it was going to be important, it was going to last. And now it's a bedrock of our community. So they told us we couldn't go out and support these people. So I had to write to people in Mississippi. And I said, dear friends, and I told them that I had to be real careful because I went to my boss. My boss was from South Carolina. I need to tell you this. No, she was from North Carolina. I take that back. She was a congresswoman, and and she was a pit bulldog. She loved President Trump and was very supportive of everything he did. But she even said, "Well, we said we're going to. We had 7 years to replace and repeal it. We didn't do it. So now we need to be out helping and supporting the people and telling them how they can get their health insurance." She agreed with that, even though she didn't like the ACA. But she said, well, "This is our job." And it was a really sexist organization too. I'll tell you that. Administration. Let me tell you why. Every other administration I had, I mentioned I worked for a regional director. There were 10. Every other instance, at least 6 of them were women. Now,
Mm-hmm.
in the Trump administration, my boss was the only woman, and she was the most qualified because she was the only one that had come from Congress. She worked with Tom Price, who was President Trump's first Health and Human Services secretary when he was first elected. Now, Tom Price who's a senator out of Georgia, lost his. He ended up resigning because he lost his position because they said he was inappropriately using private jets and commingling, on government time to do stuff. And so, but she knew him and had worked with him, and that's how she got hired. And so she didn't stay long because she said all these good old boys, these white men who he had elected as regional directors, they were shutting her down. They wouldn't listen to her. They wouldn't give her the time of day. Somebody I'm close to calls it mansplaining, right? They just kind of dismissed her. And her thing, I'll tell you, this is interesting. Renee Elmers was her name. She was a congresswoman out of the area around Fort Bragg and Raleigh, North Carolina. But she very accomplished, very well spoken. Liked her, and she just left. She said, I don't need this." But so when they told us we couldn't be out supporting the people, and I know that the people in Mississippi were expecting her to come. We met with them, and I go in there, and she says, "Yeah, we got to tell them." So I went home. I wrote the email, shared it with, prayed about it, shared it with her the next day, and sent it off. And they sent it back, and they says, "Well, what do you mean?" They called me. "What do you mean you can't come?" So I'm very careful with my words, right? Because I understand this is a very dicey situation. And I said, "Well, we just found this out yesterday, et cetera, et cetera." Well, 3 days later, I get this email, this newsletter. They send a monthly newsletter out, this organization in Mississippi called MHAP, the Mississippi Health Advocacy Program. And the banner headline says, "HHS abandons Mississippians." So you know what I'm sitting there saying to myself? Oh, excrement, right? Because I know that it's about to hit the fan. So I take it into her. And so she says, "Well, we got to call DC." So we call our handlers because we don't want to hear about it any other way. We call them. Then they call right back. My boss, person I report to, calls top people. So the head of personnel and the person who managed the regional directors calls us back. And the head of personnel is a black lady. And I don't think she wanted to do this, but I think she had to do it or felt she did. She says, "Well, Derric, why did you feel the need to send that email?" Some here are saying I'm stewing inside, I'm biting my tongue, blood's coming out the corners of my mouth. And I'm saying, and then I finally said, "Well, would you have preferred we simply didn't show up? They had expecting us and to come. Would you expect?" And and then so she goes, "Well, she never answered that question." They said, "Well, listen, this is what we're going to do." Her and her boss, they said, "We're going to send you tomorrow to send to them an apology." Number one, she said. Number two, she said, "I want you to go home and write a rationale as to why you felt it was so important that you go and do this tour that we do." So I go back, and they told us who to send it to. My boss gets off the phone, and she hangs up the phone. She's livid. She says, Renee Elvin, she says, "Look," she tells me and the staff, she goes, "Look, if I don't come back Monday, it's just been good working with you guys." And she was pissed. So I go home and do what I had to do. Come back, and uh, and she sees it. She says, "Okay, yep, send it off." And of course, I sent it off and everything. But what I did was I wrote down the history of Mississippi. So Mississippi is the blackest state in the country. It's one of the poorest. Uh, all these health disparities that we talked about. It's the least educated. One, the poor, all of the isms of Mississippi, right? And so I explained that's the state of the 8 states that I had responsibility for. I spent the most time in. And it also has the deepest vestiges of Jim Crow and racism.
Right.
Uh, so the guy I write it to, he thanks me because, there's nothing you can deny in it. But
Right.
I knew it was I'm just doing what I'm checking off a box. I knew it wasn't going to change anything. So 3 days later, maybe, this guy who was coordinating the tour, along with the head of the FQHCs in Mississippi, and also the navigator head. So those three had kind of worked which places we're going to stop. They were working all those angles for us. He shows up on Ari Melber's MSNBC show. Can't remember what the name of Ari Melber is. I don't know if you watch cable news, but and he says his teaser for his show was, "We got explosive new news. I'm going to have a guest, Roy Mitchell, the head of MHAP, and he's going to talk about how HHS is sabotaging the Affordable Care Act." So the show starts, and my eyes are getting big, and my email is up on the screen on Ari Melber's show. And so again, I said, "Oh, excrement." So I call her and let her know it's happening. And so it got real crazy. So we were really ostracized from that point on. That's the one administration I worked in, we never got a raise. And we didn't get a bonus because you had certain metrics and you could get bonuses. But we weren't getting that because we were who we were. So all of those things added to the trauma. In fact, this is one last thing I'll say about that. I believe Trump had this, and I will say it like this, and you can remove it if you want. But I said that he had a hard on to destroy Obama's legacy. He just, because of what happened at the correspondence dinner, I don't know, when Obama kind of mocked him because of his role. The birther thing came from Trump, Trump, oh, Obama really is an American. He's this, he's that. And they kind of laughed at it at the correspondence. You could see Trump steaming over there when they put the spotlight on him. And so when he was elected, they told CMS to destroy all of the ACA material. So we had thousands of dollars of stuff. So my friend at CMS, who said she wasn't going to send out any of the information because they told us we, weren't going to be supportive. Now, they didn't say we couldn't send stuff out. They said, well, we couldn't go and be in person. But she said, I'm not going to do nothing. And so I sent it out instead. But she called me up, and we called all of the people in Metro Atlanta, all the federally qualified health centers, the navigators, all of the partners that we had that we were on these calls with, every week or every other week. And they said, look, you need to meet us down on the curb on the corner of our building because we've been told to get rid of this stuff and we don't want to throw it away. We know you can all use it because they had to pay for it. Mm. And so the cars lined up and we grabbed these big crates and we spent half the day wheeling it down and giving it away. And so, I mean, so all that was, also trauma informed. And so it was indeed the longest 4 years of my life.
Wow. Yeah, well, that sounds like it. Oh my gosh. That sounds so horrible. And, I'm just listening to you, and there's something that runs throughout everything you're saying. And I think, well, two things. And I think one of them is that, we need to do something. Somebody needs to do something. And when you were talking about like the civil rights movements and everything, you were talking about the pride of the people, and you were talking about how they fought. And it wasn't violent fighting, but it was fighting for something they believed in truly.
Yeah.
And
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, this country was formed out of protests. I mean, we know about the Boston Tea Party. We know about the Battle of Bunker Hill, which really wasn't Bunker Hill, but all of these things that were in this country talked about what taxation without representation. So all of these are bedrock principles to who and what this country is. So protest but yet we have it as a country. We have this reputation, or we had until January 6th of a certain year, right? We had this reputation as being the only country in the world that had this length of peaceful transfer of power. And so, and the thing that the Republicans have traditionally stood for is the rule of law. And so the rule of law is being abused right now by this person who doesn't care about the rule of law, and he tramples on the rule of law. And so, yeah, you're right. There's so much here, and so right after he was elected, we had the largest women's march in the history of this country. And so, what? No King's Day. What was that? Back in maybe June,
Yeah,
I
it was.
think, or yeah. So it was recently. We had the huge turnout. So I think people are being activated and energized. We're doing things because the thing that people who voted for him, even, I think people voted for him for different reasons, of course, right? And a lot of them I ran into say this. They said, we knew he was going to do this, but we didn't think he was going to do that. It's like certain things they're fine with, but other things, they're not fine with. And but he doesn't care because he's on his mission. And what we're going to find, though, just like with COVID, ultimately, COVID got out of the big cities. I mean, it was really impacted the big cities. It did, but eventually it got into the rural areas, which is the the base of Trump country. And the same thing is going to happen now when you start squeezing these federal resources, like what he's doing to the Department of Education. But again, these rural hospitals closing and access to all of this, with Medicaid being restructured and just uh, just whittled down so far, it's going to hurt his people that what Lyndon Johnson said way back you know, um, when there's something with particularly rural white people, and I don't mean all by any means, because nothing is everybody, right? But poor people who will vote against their own best interest. And they want to expand Medicaid because the governor doesn't want to expand Medicaid, and the white elite don't want to expand Medicaid. But, you know, you're much more like your black neighbor in many instances than you are the guy that's sitting in the governor's mansion. So you vote against your own best interest. And that was a famous quote by President Lyndon Baines Johnson. He says, "At least you're not them. At least I'm not them." Right? So you're kind of above somebody in some crazy, twisted way. So yeah, we are gonna have to stand up if we want this country to remain a free country.
Yeah, definitely. And I think another thing that you said that really stuck with me when you kept saying uh, people wanted other people to see them as human. And you kept talking about how African Americans went through a long period where they weren't seen as human beings. And I remember I did some work with our homeless population back in Charleston, and I remember talking to one of my friends. Um, it was his birthday, and he said, thank you for having a conversation with me because most people look at me and think that I'm a problem. They look at me like I'm trash. And that really stuck with me so deeply. And I think that's a big problem today, that people just look at people as objects or problems to get rid of, and they don't really look at them as human beings, right?
Absolutely, I would say this. So another big issue, and I write about my new book, The Longest 4 Years of My Life. brief in the field by a black vet in the Trump administration is that this president is superb. If people want to say he's stupid, he's not stupid at all. In certain ways, he's brilliant because he's done something that better than any president in the modern era, and it's an evil genius in my opinion, and that is he's really superb at othering. So like those bad Latinos who are rapists and thieves, and that if we let them into our country, this had he framed the Asian the China virus. And so remember, you may remember Asians were being attacked and beaten up, older people who
Yeah.
had, nothing but, and we know that they were right after World War II, after the Japanese uh, bombed Pearl Harbor, they were rounding up all kind of Asians and putting them in internment camps, right? So black-led cities. He goes after the squad. What uh, Ilhan Omar and those four young women, bright women congressmen, AOC Alexandria Ocasio Cortez and that group. And so he is really good at othering, and those people are the enemy. These are bad people. And part of that, Melody, is that there's a concern, or was a concern. Now he's rounding up so many Latinos who are the fastest growing communities that he may have thwarted this, but allegedly, theoretically, by around 2042-ish, we were supposed to become a minority majority country. So there is this darkening of America to make it really the true melting pot that we have long, I think, believed that it is. And I think that that is a very fearsome thing, quite honestly, to particularly, I think, white communities that are homogeneous communities. You're not in the rural communities where it's almost, if it's in Montana or the Dakotas or certain parts of Colorado or, you know, Idaho, where there's not other people around. You have some Native Americans who've been chased off their lands probably, and you may have some Latinos, but you don't have, it's not a multicultural society because I believe, when you get to know people, 9 times out of 10, you realize, well, hey, they want the same thing I want. You want to earn a decent living, you want to raise your kids in peace, you want a chance to own a home and get an education and leave a legacy. That's what most people want. But if you don't know anybody else who's not doesn't look like you, isn't you know like you in ethnically or geographically, it's real easy for somebody to paint them as the bad guy, the spook, the other. And so he's great at that. And that's kind of what we were what I think what goes to that. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Oh, I 100% agree. And it's horrible to watch. And I know another thing that you said was how beneficial it was to you um, to go and travel and see different people and see different cultures. And,
Yes.
I've been able to do that as well
Yeah.
to various countries. And even within this country, just seeing people in different areas that are different than I am.
Yeah.
And it is amazing what that brings to your life. And I think that that's what makes everything so beautiful about this world and about this life is that we're all so beautifully unique and
Yes.
different.
Yes.
And when we come
Yeah.
together, we can do powerful and big things if we'll just work together and recognize each other and be kind to each other and love each other. Do you agree?
Absolutely. Absolutely agree. I think that to a large extent, our strength is in our diversity, because everybody brings something different to the table. And we are this really glorious melting pot. And, and a lot of people haven't done this research and haven't thought it through this way. But I'll say this to a large extent. because of the transcontinental slave trade, Black Americans built the wealth of this country. There was one time rice was the biggest economic engine in this country. Cotton, King Cotton was for many, many years. So when Black soldiers came back from World War II, um, the GI Bill, because of the the housing laws, did not allow Black people in many instances. The Black GIs couldn't get loans to go to school. Like that's when white college enrollment just expanded. It blossomed because it was the first time soldiers could go to school on a GI Bill, get a college education, and they could also get loans to get a house, to buy their first house. And so you think about the generational wealth that began for for many white families right after World War II that Black people were shut out of. And Black people died higher percentages and numbers in these wars. Many of them were put on the front lines. And so, and that was codified. That was part of the Federal Housing Administration's, that was their laws. And then you add redlining and blockbusting and all these kind of things that were there to prevent Black people from moving into neighborhoods. And so, yeah, I mean, but I'm proud that Black people have overcome that and still made tremendous contributions um, to to our society. But one of the things that President Trump did also that was really problematic to me was, you remember and I'll say it this way, the murder of George Floyd, because those cops were convicted. I mean, and to think that he could, in broad daylight, knowing he was being filmed, and essentially just execute that man. And then we had Breonna Taylor, and we've had these instances, Ahmaud Arbery, and so when you have, it's like the famous comedian Chris Rock said this. Black comedian says, it wasn't that these things weren't always happening, but now they're being filmed. We're catching them. And so when the whole world could see this, and it brought Americans, Black, white, men, women, young, old, out in tens of thousands to march and protest against, to a large extent, the over policing of unarmed Black men. And so the problem was that it didn't last. It didn't keep going, and so that was though the energy that sparked the change in the 60s. And it was that energy then, but what that president then, the president now did, he wanted to make those marches. Well, number one, he wanted to call them all riots, and in very few instances there were riots. But again, Dr. King always said this: the riots are the language of the unheard, and we're talking about, again, being trauma enforced, right? So these people were coming out, and most of the time very peacefully, and our police state pushed back against them and lots of times instigated the violence. But he wanted to make these marches be a bit patriotism and the flag, but that wasn't what they were about. And so that's the problem there. And so, and this condemnation, this demonization of being woke. Well, listen, I'll tell you, any day of the week, I'd rather be woke than drinking that Kool-Aid that is being
Absolutely.
served up. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So yeah, so it's like he told the NFL when the players like Colin Kaepernick took a knee,
Yeah.
he said, he said, fire those sons of bitches. His words, not mine, but that was what he told the owners.
Yeah.
And Jerry Jones of the Dallas Cowboys, they have him in a picture of one of the white students protesting in Little Rock when the schools were being integrated. He was on the steps, one of those protesters, shouting for them not to integrate the school. So there's a lot there in terms of big business in this country. And so, but if you make people afraid and you make people the other, it takes you a very long way, and it's not a good way. It's the opposite way for what this country has meant for 250 years to people around the world about what America is and what America stands
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely, definitely. And, another thing that I noticed as you're speaking is that the trauma continues and it
for.
keeps on continuing. And, I could never know, ever know what it's like to be an African American in this country, be it a woman, be it a man, be it a
Right.
child. I could never know. I can't even imagine. And it's just so it's so, I don't want to say interesting, but it's tragic to watch that continually happen, and the people that it is happening to every day, because it's not just one, it's not just, it's all, and they're required to be at a certain standard all the time, and not just a certain standard like societal standard, but it's like twice as much. It's you always have to do more, and people just don't know what others are going through when those kind of things happen. Can you speak on that a little, if you feel
Yeah.
comfortable?
No, absolutely. It's like walk a mile in my shoes, right? I'll give you an example. Dylan Roof, who went into the church in Charleston,
Yeah.
and when he came into the Bible study, I mean, he planned this, right? And so he was, and he'd been infested and taken over by hate, right? Because he didn't even know these people, and they welcomed him in. That's one thing about the black church. I don't think anybody can go to any black church that I've ever been into, and you're gonna be welcomed and included and come in, and we're excited you're here because you recognize our humanity and want to come worship with us. And so he did that, of course, and he came in, and his whole purpose was to kill those 8 or 9 people. And then when they did arrest him, the cops asked him if he was hungry and wanted to take him to the restaurant to eat. Now, you know, that doesn't happen to black kids. One of the things I'll tell you about is that because we understood, my wife had grown up in the inner city, Chicago, and I had not, but we understood that a lot of police officers, and I give them credit for the fact that they too, I mean, every day of their lives out on a beat or stopping people is trauma informed, right? But a lot of times I think they have certain preconceptions about people of color, certain, that they would not have with if they stopped, your father, your husband. And so growing up, we told our kids all the time, particularly our son, if you ever get stopped, hands at 10 o'clock and right, hands on the steering wheel. Yes, sir. No, sir. And it's like a famous comedian who was foul, but he was very much a truth speaker. Richard Pryor used to say, Officer Tinsley, I am reaching into my pocket to get my wallet. I mean, you were very deliberate, very yes or no, sir, no, sir. And I think I go to church in a multicultural church, and a good friend of mine is from Paris, married an American, came over here, and she just said, and I've heard other people say it too, white people say, I never thought about the fact how I have to warn my kids, caution my kids. I never have to warn my sons and caution my sons about how to act if they get a police stops them for anything. And so that's an additional layer of trauma. All black families face. And because we tell my kids all the time, look, we can fight anything if it's some sense of unjust that you encounter on with if we get you home, but we have to get you if you're, if it, because hey, it happens all the time. Uh, and you see instances. I write about this instance of this lady who had her daughters and maybe two or three of her nieces. They were going to the hairdresser in maybe in Colorado Springs. This cop stops them, says they have a stolen car and wasn't. It was a mistake. Had the kids handcuffed on their face along with the mother. 7 or 8 year old kid. Now, that kind of trauma you never forget, and so it would have never happened to a white family. So those are the kind of things that are way too common. I'll tell you, you got me going now. So I'm enjoying this because people don't usually want to talk about trauma, and in fact, I'm part of something called an immersion session, and it's generally aimed at people because you think you have to have some. It's people who've had these are Christians, but they have some level of experience. And I'll say this is interesting. I am an evangelical Christian. Now, the evangelical Christians, as a lot, have been the biggest supporters of Donald Trump and the biggest thorn in the side of progress, democracy, real democracy in this country since Donald Trump emerged on the scene. And it's because of his stance on, like the trans community and immigration, and again, stoking that fear, those bad people, those bad brown people who are taking over our country, right? But when I'd been married for not long because I think I got married in '79, and my oldest son was born in 1980, the one we just celebrated his 45th birthday. So my wife and I had gone out to a drive-in here in Metro Atlanta. When you used to have drive-in theaters, you had the huge screen. They may have a few of them somewhere anymore, but young people wouldn't know what we're talking about, right? But
Yeah.
you and I do. And I have no idea what was playing. And it was her birthday. And we went out, and the next day we're going to church because we're believers. And my wife was very ripe with child. Probably, maybe we weren't due for another month or so, but coming after the show, stop at a gas station, going to gas up now instead of tomorrow because we're going to go to church. And these four, I can remember it's four, maybe five young white guys come up to me as I'm gassing up the car. And they're starting to say all kind of things, nigga this, epitaph this, we're going to do this to you. She's in the passenger seat. She's watching. I'm pumping gas slowly. I'm thinking, of course, I'm, you know, concerned. And in the end, nothing happened. I tried to make sure I saved some gas in case, because I I didn't have anything with me. My wife's in the car looking mortified. So they just talk a bunch of stuff and then they walked away. We go home though. She goes into labor. No, she's triggered, right?
Yeah.
We go to the hospital and first child, we didn't know. It ended up being a C-section. It was like 15 hours, right? Really crazy. And by the way, I'll say this. I'm just going to segue just for a second. Black women die in childbirth at like 4 times the rate of white women in this society, even in this society where we're so progressive. And and that wasn't even something talked about back then. But in fact, we lost maybe in the last year an Olympic champion, U.S. sprinter, who died in childbirth. So then, when she finally has the child, and this is a very prominent hospital in Metro Atlanta, whoever the attendant is comes in and says, I don't remember exactly the way they said it, but they say it to me and my wife. We're there waiting for them to bring the baby back. No, uh, you know, I'm sorry you lost the baby. Well, we didn't lose the baby. Then he says, uh, just kidding, something to that effect. So, talk about trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma, right?
Mm-mm.
Now, how do you do that to a fellow human being? Uh, is something you don't see that person as you see your family member, your friend, your loved one. You simply can't. And I mean, I mean, we weren't that young. I was mid-20s, but I'm saying that weren't even thinking about like the legal ramifications, other kind of things like that. But that's another, real instance of induced trauma, and it's crazy because those are the kind of things or that kind of mindset that had made me so eager to leave the South. And then, in a sense, I had almost just gotten back to it, and then I ran right back into it. So I believe in the end that a lot of this designed me to be somebody who life work was in this field of fighting, pushing for justice, racial righteousness, and social justice. And I think, I have the temperament for it, and God has equipped me for it. And that's just kind of what I've done this last however many years and will do until my dying breath. And I think it's basically telling these stories and messaging. Um, I have a memoir that I've got over 200 pages on, and that's going to be, so not that far down the road, probably, but it really talks about a lot of my personal experiences. But, this last book was talked so much about people who were really seriously impacted by, again, COVID, uh, uh, the impact of the justice marches, and why in the end they fizzled out, and the Affordable Care Act, and why, how our country is going to really, to be the most advanced country in the world, we spend a lot of money on healthcare and we don't get the return. But now it's going to get so much worse, so much worse.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Well, Derric, I want to thank you so much for this wonderful,
Yeah, you
wonderful.
got lots of segments here, probably. Yeah, thank
Yes,
you.
absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing. And you are always welcome. I hope you come back and talk to us some more.
I would love to, and I don't know if you are able somewhere on your site or your messaging to like post my website so people who want to find out more about me, have an interest in my books, my story, my career trajectory, my life can get that. But
Yeah, oh,
if
absolutely. Yeah.
if so, and can I tell them now?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Sure, sure. So, if you Google me, you'll see a bunch of stuff, different things. But my name is Derric, Deric. Last name Gilliard, Gilliard. And my website is derricgilliard.com. You'll find out about my, kind of history, my life story, and my two books. And I think you'll find them both interesting and you'll find them both really related. And I hope you will think about checking them out, supporting the work, because again, um, because of the political climate, a lot of people are afraid to touch my book. And I mean, I thought I'd be on the college circuit right now doing all kind of places. But, people who, colleges, universities, who talk about diversity and equity and inclusion, are having their money stripped, right? We're seeing this at all these colleges and universities. We're seeing educators and students snatched off the streets. So people are afraid, but I just believe when I run into that, that means that this message is that much more important. And if we're going to have a free society, we need to be educated about what's trying to take that away. And I tried to warn people about Project 2025, but check it out. Get it there. You could get it on Amazon. I'd prefer you get it from me if you will, just because uh, Amazon is a little bit usurious. But I thank you so much, Melody. I look forward to the next time, and let me know when and where I can see this hear this via email. And yeah, I'd love to come back at some point in time, and we'll just see how much more trauma has been and forced upon us, and where we are, and kind of what can we do about it.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you so much, Derric. I really appreciate it. And definitely, everybody just check out these books, go to the website, keep talking. And um, when when we air this episode, I'll have those links in the comments on all the
Fantastic.
social media so that you can access it.
Fantastic. Thank you. Setting up my YouTube now. Thank you.
All
Appreciate you,
right.
Melody.
Oh,
Blessing.
thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Derric.
Bye.